Okay, for this video we want to add some materials to our mass and do a little bit of manipulation to that mass. So I'm going to come in here and select the mass. I'm in the project mode right now. I'm outside of the edit in place mode. So I'm going to select that object, and when you do, you have shape handles that you can move around, but there are no listening dimensions and you have no access to the individual points or faces. So if I go to edit in place, it takes me into the sketch mode again, and I then have access to these individual points. Okay, pull that down a little bit, maybe. So you can come in and within reason you can adjust these. So as long as I'm keeping in plane with our other constraints, so for example I constrained this top to level 3 and the bottom to level 1, it will allow us to pull it around. But if we try to pull it off plane, it will yell at us and it will say the constraints are not satisfied. Do you want to remove the constraints? And you have to make a decision on, whether you want to remove those constraints or not. Okay, so I'm not going to remove the constraints. I'm going to leave it as orthogonal between those two levels. But once you have a mass, you can come in here, and if it's unconstrained, so if I come in here and create another mass just to show you, I'm just going to create form again. So this one's completely unconstrained, right? I can come in and I can adjust different parts of this. So I can come in and select an edge and move it. I can select a point and move it. Right? I can select another point and move it. I can select a face and move it. Right? So that whole thing is adjustable. Okay. Let's go ahead, and it's kind of hard to see these. Revit creates masses by default with transparency, which is kind of nice in some ways, but sometimes hard to see. So I'm just going to select this object, and I'm going to go to the material here and click on the right side of that box, and it's going to open up my material browser, and I'm going to go ahead and create a new material. So up here in the search, I'm going to type default, and it's going to show me all of the default options in the material browser that are available to me. Now the material browser, these options right here are actually in the project already. These options down here are actually in a library that's either on a server or on your hard drive that you have access to. So I'm just going to select on default here, and I want to make a new material from this sort of default template. So I'm going to right click on it and go to duplicate, and I'm going to rename it building O, or we'll rename it B03, so building 03. Okay, and hit return. Now over here, the first thing I want to do is control what it looks like. So I'm going to go to the appearance tab, and one thing that you need to pay attention to is right up here where it says default with a bracket of 1, and this hand, it has a 1 in it. What that 1 means is that this material attribute is shared with another material. So these two have the same material attribute. That means that if I update this one, that one will update as well. So I want to separate them, and to do that I'm going to come over here and check duplicate asset. So if I duplicate that asset, it will update this to 0 and call this default 6. If you'd like to change the name of this appearance or asset, you can come into this information and you could name it mass material. And you could also place another keyword in here like mass, so when you search for it, it will come up. Okay. Now once we've done that, we can change the color of it. I'm just going to change it to green here and click OK. And click OK. Oh, sorry, don't click OK yet. As I said before, the appearance is what it looks like when it renders. So for those of you that are familiar with rendering, you have a lot of options here. If you go to graphics, the graphics tab, this is what it looks like in the viewport, and we want to use render appearance for shading so it'll look the same. The surface pattern is what it looks like in projection and elevation, and the cut pattern is what it looks like when it's sectioned. I generally will always, when I'm creating a new material, just set it up to my default, which is a solid fill with gray. Just in case I section it, that's what it looks like. Alright, so once we're done with that, we can click OK. Right? And let's see, it didn't assign it, so let's make sure that I didn't select it before I left, so it didn't assign it. So I'm going to go assign it now. So left click on that, make sure building 03 is selected, and click OK. So now that has building 03 on it. We can also pick this and assign building 03 to it as well. So you may notice that right now I have two masses in one family, and you can definitely do it that way. It just depends on how you want to. I usually separate my different buildings into different masses. Okay, so let's take a look just a little bit at this unrestricted mass and things you can do with it. If I select it and I go to add edge, it will add an edge right there for me. You can also use add edge to make a surface developable or to facet a surface. So this over here, this surface is curved, right? If I come in and I pick this object and I go to add edge, I can pick that corner and pick that corner, and it will facet it, right? So now it's a faceted flat object, right? The other thing that you can do with these things is you can pick it, and if you go to form element, you can add a profile, which will add another horizontal selection set for you. So once you pick that, if I go back and pick it and go to my X-ray mode, this is how it's basically building that solid, and these are all the points that you have access to manipulate that solid. So in X-ray mode, you can actually come in and adjust just about any part of this thing, right? So Revit is really showing you how it's generating that solid, right? It's going through and creating a series of profiles along a sweep, basically, right? So you can get complex very quickly. All right. So to get out of X-ray mode with these, it's just a toggle. So you pick it and click X-ray, and it goes back. So I'm going to tab select this guy and delete him because we're working with this. All right. So let's say that you've got this form exactly the way that you want it. So we'll just click Finish Mass here. All right. And in the next installment, we'll come in and create some views that you can use to sort of document this. So I'll be back.